I don't know if I've liked anybody as much as I liked the Ultimate Warrior when I was a kid. I had signed up for Dean Malenko School when I was a sophomore in high school, and I sent him it was like $250 or $500 or something deposit. But then I called him before I was about to graduate, like in February of '99. I called him and said, I'm going to be coming down this, we're going to be closing. We're not going to be running anymore. So Shawn Michaels School opened up right then, and then I heard about that, and then I just pretty much, I called, and, I didn't have anything better, and so I was like, oh, okay, because you wrestle like a Japanese guy, but you're American. I was like, a lot of times I think, man, what am I doing, because it never really seems like I'm going to make it, it never really seems that way. Man, I still feel like, I'm never, I'm just not as good as those guys, as all these guys that you look up to. It was really nerve-wracking because, it's your first match and there's like 200 people there and nobody knows who you are, and we're the first students from Shawn's school to have a match. For your first match to have Shawn Michaels come out, and, there was no plan to do that. He just came out and said, Shawn said something like, I smell money, because, and it's true. We just showed Masato Tanaka and another guy, we showed them our moves and said, and they kind of said, this is what we like, this is what we don't like. The tryout match we were all really excited for. Like I was working at a cookie store in the mall, and I quit my job, and we had rent to pay and everything like that, and so we were all really hopeful for it just financially because we were all so poor. It was just a really emotional night, and that's kind of what makes this matches special more than anything else. It's just the emotions you connect with them. And he knows so much. He's been wrestling since he's like 15, and so that's where I learned all my mat wrestling and stuff, and try to make what you do make sense, and that's what I learned from Steve. Because we got to train with Steve, we got to train with Tracy Smothers and Bobby Eaton and stuff like that, and so it was just one of those, and we got to wrestle 3 or 4 times a week, and that was our full-time job. We didn't have to worry about going to McDonald's, putting in 8 hours, and then, doing whatever, and then going to a wrestling show. And so I felt really bad, too, because I kicked him really hard in the head. And he's Jerry Lynn, I just waffled him right in the head. And so they just bought in WCW, and they'd given us a couple speeches already about how, you guys, when we're ready to do WCW TV, you guys are going to be on it. I thought on the one hand, I've worked really hard since I've been here, I'm hoping that they see that, and how much I've improved and I've gotten bigger and everything. But on the other hand, I thought, why are they going to keep me? There's no reason for them to keep me. They've got all these WCW guys, and there were guys out there who were just as good or better than we were, who didn't have deals, who were struggling on the indies, who nobody really knew about, and so we came back from the thing really humbled more than anything else. I've been lucky because I've been trained by a lot of good people. But you see somebody like Loki, who's been trained by, I'm not saying Homicide isn't good, he's very good, but he's like, he didn't have the opportunity to train with guys who have already been there and already done that kind of stuff. Loki's as good as he is because of how hard he works, not because somebody told him, or taught him how to be that good. A lot of us don't have people to tell us what's good and what's bad. You have to do that kind of stuff on your own, or force people to tell you what's good and bad, because too many people are just going to say, oh yeah, it was good, it was good, it was fine, keep doing what you're doing, because that's the easiest answer to give anybody. They think it's easy, and then they go in there, and then, and then they learn how to bump, and they think, oh, bumping's easy. But then when you do it for 5 or 6 days in a row, for 5 months in a row or whatever, and then you have to go out there and there's a lot of stress putting together matches and stuff like that. A lot of people they realize that they don't enjoy it. Things where you can't blame the people who do Tough Enough for doing Tough Enough. Like, you can't be bitter at Maven for winning Tough Enough. It's hard on indie wrestlers and stuff like that because it's like, wait a second, CM Punk and I and Steve Regal were just talking about this the other day. Nothing was really happening for me. You get kind of in a rut, and I was used to moving a lot. Like, I've been moving, and so it was just kind of time to just move down to LA and see what I could do there. Of our backyard wrestling stuff, and it wasn't really backyard wrestling because in Washington State it's always raining, and so it was more like living room wrestling where we wrestled on a mattress. I despise doing 3-ways. I like singles matches. because it's only two people's ideas. And it's easier to communicate that way. Tag matches, I like tag matches too, but it's hard because sometimes 4 different people may have 4 different ideas. But I look at shows as either, you know, just on how much fun I have doing them. But because their fans are so bloodthirsty, like it's funny because there's kids in it, and then there's people who like just want to see blood. And so I don't know how much the fans there actually respect the wrestlers, and which is the hardest thing to do, is wrestle in front of people who expect for their $10 for you to kill yourself. And that's what separates guys like Eddie Guerrero and Super Crazy from other people, is that they're not going out there to be the main event even when they're not the main event. They're going out there to be the best match that they can do with their spot on the card. They're doing what's best for the show itself. And he is very creative with his ideas, and he has a good sense of what's funny and what's not funny. Like I'm not funny at all. I'm a dork. If you asked me to come up with a funny promo, you know, I'd be lost. But Spanky, you know, if you ask him to come up with a funny promo, he would take something that you would think would be the stupidest thing in the world and make it hilarious, you know. And then I told the ref to have AJ stay away from my ribs. Well, the ref Hanson goes and tells AJ, you know, stay away from my ribs. But AJ thought he heard work the ribs. So the very first thing he does, and people told me that they liked the move and stuff like that. How it got the name cattle mutilation, I have no idea. Loki told me about that. He said, well, and then you put me in the cattle mutilation. I was like, what are you talking about? Cattle mutilation, that's the stupidest name ever. That's what it's called. Where did you hear that? The scheduling of it is pretty hard because it's 5 days a week. It's Monday through Friday. And then when you do the indie shows on the weekends and everything, that just makes for, you know, you never get a day off. And so now I actually look forward to weekends where I don't have any bookings, because then I can just lay there and just do nothing. Like, I never thought I'd be wrestling for the WWF when I started, because I thought I was too small. I thought maybe WCW at what, you know, this is how I think everybody has a picture, an idea in their mind of how their career will go. And you have such high expectations of yourself, and you don't want to go out there and wrestle Jushin Liger and be like, and have him think you're a schmo. You know, first you go out there and you're wrestling in the Tokyo Dome show in front of 40,000 people or whatever, and you go out there and you just look and you're like, this is nuts. You know, last week I was wrestling in front of 100 people. And the neat thing about those guys is how much they love American wrestling. Like Gato was telling us how much he loves the Midnight Express. And I just thought that's so weird for a Japanese team to be sitting here saying how much they love the Midnight Express. And then I told him I got to train with Bobby Eaton a little bit. Oh, you know. People don't know how to use little things to make a match entertaining. So they have to use big things, because that's all they know how to do. Those guys are so good that anything negative that we do, they cover up for it, you know. And so it's one of those things, like you run around in a rat cage, you know. You think, well, maybe am I that good, or are those guys just covering up for me so good that, you know, you can't see it? I don't think they really have any interest in me, just because I'm not like Spanky. I'm not like an entertaining type of guy. You know, I'm just not very entertaining, I don't think. But like, I think the WWF has pretty much sworn off like CZW and stuff like that, and we went out there and busted our butts, and I felt it was a really fun match to do. We got back to find out that Shawn wasn't able to watch it because they didn't have a TV camera back there. But you know, coming back, it was like, yeah, you know, I hope Shawn saw that, you know, yeah. I don't know. I might just go with Bryan Danielson or something. I don't know if I ever got popular, if I'd like to use my real name, because that's kind of, you know, private. But I have no problem using my real name now. But I really have no idea. Like, Spanky knew when he came that he wanted to be Spanky. Like, I might be totally different in 10 years if I'm really bitter or whatever, you know, and that sort of thing. But now, you know, I'm really optimistic. You know, my body feels good. And so right now I'm just interested in having fun.